A recent CBS News Battleground Tracker poll of Super Tuesday states found that 13% of African American voters are considering supporting Pete Buttigieg for the Democratic nomination. Tonight's debate is in California and is one of those Super Tuesday states. Sean Shaw is a former Florida state representative and former Florida Attorney General nominee. He is supporting Pete Buttigieg and joins us now to talk more about the candidate. Sean, thanks very much for being with us.
Sure. Happy to be here. How's it going?
It's going well. So let me ask you, you endorsed Pete Buttigieg back in May. Why are you supporting his presidential bid in 2020?
Well, I often say Mayor Pete makes me feel good about the country in the way that the current president makes me feel bad. And I liked his message of optimism, of kind of transformative generational leadership. I didn't have any connection to the mayor or his campaign. I just kind of independently became aware and listened to his town halls and loved his policies and got involved early. I wanted to get involved early and make a difference. So that's where I went.
So you've been a surrogate for him in states like South Carolina. He has not polled that well there, specifically among African-American voters. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think one of the reasons is simply Mayor Pete is the only candidate who's come out of nowhere and jumped into the top tier. He's running against United States senators. He's running against the former vice president of the United States. So he has kind of come from being a small town mayor to being a top tier candidate. So he's going to have to continue to introduce himself to all voters, but certainly African-American voters in South Carolina. When I was in South Carolina on behalf of the campaign, it was certainly more of a name ID issue, and people hadn't really heard of him yet. And I think that is changing now because it's been some months since I've been there. But certainly he's just got to continue to introduce himself, his policies to that demographic.
I want to ask you about Black Lives Matter. A leader of South Bend Black Lives Matter told reporters today that Pete Buttigieg's engagement with the African-American community there is disappointing because of his direct role as mayor. Over the summer, a white police officer, as you know, shot and killed a black man in the city. And Mayor Buttigieg later said South Bend's police force was disproportionately white, quote, because I couldn't get it done. How have you observed his campaign reaching out to African-American voters there?
I'll tell you, so I'm not from South Bend. I'm from Florida. And so I can't really speak firsthand to the South Bend issues. I do know that certainly they've got a group of South Bend African-Americans who are going around talking about their direct experience. But other than the fact that he's got to do better with the South Bend Police Department, I thought him accepting blame on the debate stage there was really an impressive thing to do. Rarely do you see candidates take the blame for anything. Certainly you don't see him do it on perhaps the biggest debate stage there is. So I was very impressed to see that. But I can also say on the flip side that I agree he's got to do better diversifying the police department. So we're not trying to find someone who we're all going to worship on Sundays. All the candidates have got to talk about their records, and they're going to have to talk about things in the past and what they've done and explain some of those blemishes. All the candidates are going to have to do that. I'm just here to say that the one I believe speaks to me and the one that makes me feel the best is Mayor Pete.
I'm curious, Sean, just back on South Bend for a moment. Have you had discussions with Mayor Buttigieg? I'm not asking you to divulge if you have, what the content of those discussions were. But what do you think that disconnect is or has been in that community with African-American voters for Mayor Buttigieg?
Again, I'll give you, I don't know, but I will tell you this. I have observed Mayor Pete in direct conversations in Florida with the African-American community. I've observed him in rooms where, quite frankly, people didn't seem like they wanted to be persuaded. And by the end, it was a much more open room. Mayor Pete himself is a very good messenger. He is someone that I believe is authentic, and it comes across. And look, African-American voters are very good at picking out inauthentic candidates. And I've been in the room with him, and he himself is someone that comes across well on these issues. That's why I think he's just got to get out there and continue to talk about it, and he's going to do well. This is not someone that I think needs to be stuck in a back room because he's not going to come across well. I think the exact opposite.
Well, how do you think Mayor Buttigieg would compete in a state like Florida if he is the Democratic nominee?
Well, Florida is 3 or 4 different states, right? We've got Miami area and Tampa area where I'm from, and North Florida, which is much more rural. and it's very expensive. Florida is a whole different animal than Iowa and New Hampshire, and it's extremely diverse. It's got a large Hispanic population, large African-American population, and a lot of different issues, climate change, guns, and we're a state that's always a 1% state one way or the other. So I think he'd do very well in a state that's going to want to talk about some of the issues that he has done well on, whether that is climate change, whether that is working class voters. All voters in any state want a president that's going to have them do well, whether that is economically, whether that is in the climate, whether that is just in general optimism about how you feel about where the country's headed. And I think he's the candidate that is best equipped to give that message.
All right, Sean Shaw. Sean, thank you very much for your time.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.